Hello and welcome to episode 25 of Area Control Bros, where we continue to
Ooh,
talk about area
five.
control.
Yep.
That
And
was my
this,
epic intro. Sorry to interrupt.
no, it's fine. The big 25, we're hitting 25. So, is that the age at which you have all legal options available to you? It's like you can rent a car at 25.
I
Yeah,
think
you can rent a
so.
car at 25. That's the age.
Okay, so our podcast is now fully come of age.
That's right. Yeah, our podcast's brain is fully developed, you know? The frontal lobe has matured.
Hmm.
And with that matured lobe, we'll be speaking about Cyclades Legendary Edition this week.
That's right.
Um, so this is a not actually published by Matago Games, but in its initial printing was a Matago game. People usually refer to it as part of the Matago trilogy with Inish and Komet. This is a remix, and in most respects, I would consider an improvement and refinement of the original Cyclades. Publisher's Open Sesame Games on this one. So weight is 2.87, which is actually listed lower than Inish or Komet. I have it pulled up here. So 2.87 on Sickly's Legendary Edition, 2.95 on Inish, and Komet Blood and Sand is 3.2, probably mostly because of the tech tree. I think that sounds about right. I would consider this to be certainly lighter than Komet. Um, I don't know if I'd consider it heavier than Inish. I think the strategy of Inish is more complex, but I
I think
feel
there's
like
Yeah,
more
it's an
stuff. Yeah.
yeah, there's more stuff, but it's mostly like
Yeah.
monsters and heroes that are like adding to the rules questions and things. It's not like the core of the game in Cyclades is that complex, I think.
yeah, I would agree that the core of it is quite simple, but you
Hmm.
do get into some of the there's some minutia there to wade through when it comes to the heroes and the monsters. I mean, there's no doubt about that. We were in the rule book a decent amount in our few plays of
Yeah.
this.
Some of
So
the interactions you got to look up.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
So 2.87 though I think is fair. Like without thinking about is it, comparable to Inish's rating or not? Is it comparable to Komet's rating or not? I do think 2.87 sounds fair to me, you know?
Yeah, I think that sounds about right.
Yeah.
2.87.
It's got a little bit of fiddliness. Like there's when you make one of the metropolises, when you make it, lets you reserve a monster, which is not a mechanic that is present anywhere else in the game, except for that one metropolis when you build it.
Right. And they of course do it with a symbol. So then you look at the symbol and you go, I think that's a monster symbol, but I don't
Yeah.
know. And you got to look at the rule book, it's
I
just you
think
got
that's
to.
part of it, though. Though I think the reason you are going to be looking up things is because even though the monsters and the heroes do have text on them, the text is relatively laconic. It may not
Hmm.
be sufficient to tell you like exactly how it'll interact with whatever the board state
Right.
currently is. Fortunately, the rule book, despite being a frankly subpar rule book in other ways, does have a good FAQ section and sort of a little extra
Yeah.
bit for the heroes and monsters that are probably going to address a good amount. There's a good thread on the BGG forums that has like a significantly expanded FAQ for this version of the game that answers most of the questions. And actually, in perusing that after our most recent plays of the game, I discovered there was a rule that we got wrong that if I had not looked this up, I would never have known that I got it wrong, which
Okay.
is that the temples provide their discount on monsters a maximum of once per turn,
Oh.
Huh. Okay.
which does come up, but
Yeah, definitely.
it does come up, but it would be like if you had two temples and you like bought a two cost monster for zero, any subsequent monster you purchase will not have any discount applied to it. But what's weird about that is there's not really a way like in the game to show that you've used a temple. Like you
Well,
can't
you can't tap it. Yeah.
you can't tap it or flip it or something like that. So it's kind of like you just have to know. Seems kind of odd to me. Uh, but at the same time, I don't think it's that important very often because usually temples are going to be sucked into making a metropolis soon enough anyway. So
Right.
there's not going to be a time where you're sitting on like more than two temples, I think, where that might get out of control. but
Yeah.
just a
We should
minor
probably
thing.
talk about the like win condition because like Matago usually has like a kind of weird win conditions with like Inish and Komet, both having like pretty unique ones. And Galactic Renaissance much yeah, also has a unique one as well.
Sure.
Yeah.
This
I
one
think
is
I'm gonna hurl. Did you just say Galactic Renaissance?
yeah. Did
Oh
you
gosh.
This game has actually got a relatively straightforward win condition, which is just have three metropolises. I don't think it's nearly as uh frankly, it's not as nearly as exciting an end game. Like it's more like you're stopping people, trying to stop people from getting their third metropolis, or
Yeah.
stopping people from holding their third metropolis at the end of the turn,
Yeah, like you
which
might be able to take theirs and then win yourself, but you're not gonna have much of that like, you know, oh, the game was going to end this round and then it didn't. You might have a the game was going to end and Will was going to win and instead Ben won or instead Blake won or whatever, you know.
yeah, I
Uh,
think the end game is much more stable in this. It's not like you're not going to go from in a situation where like somebody prevents someone else from winning, they probably won.
yeah.
Like I think
Yeah.
that it's
It's certainly possible that they don't, but they
yes.
probably did because people are advancing at a similar pace in this game
Well, and the
usually.
metropolises are like permanent. So like
Yeah,
Yep.
there's VP for up for grabs on the board.
right.
Like
And
Yeah,
something to be said about it only being three of them, you know, I mean, that's going from 9 to 10 in Komet is a lot different than going from 2 to 3 in Cyclades. I mean,
yeah.
that's a
In a lot of
50% increase here.
in a lot of ways, this game to me feels like you kind of skip from early game straight into late game. Like you're
mhm.
getting like built up, and then like all of a sudden, like the metropolises are on the board, and it's like, oh crap.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh no, there's three Metropolis on the board. I need the turtle,
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
let me protect my booty.
Yep.
Yeah. Got to watch out for a Pegasus dropping in.
That's right. But yeah, you get these Metropolis through a few different ways. Obviously, the main way I would say is by getting all four of the different building types, which you're going to get sort of naturally throughout the game by playing the different gods. And so there's a little bit of an encouragement to bid on a variety of the different god tiles, which we'll get into kind of what they do. And I think that'll be a big part of what we end up talking about here as far as the feeling of the game and the balance of the game and the like. Because not all gods are created equal in Cyclades, let me tell you. But, they all do kind of have their own little building associated with them, except for Hera, who will build you a building that you don't have and sort of covers some ground there, which I like because Hera's pretty strong. You want to get Hera and then can kind of, oh, maybe you're not going for one of the other ones or you weren't able to get it, so Hera will cover you.
I
Um,
like it too. I just want to bring this up because like we originally played it where you could just build one of any type. Um, but like it is like the rule is you have to build something that you don't have. Which I'm not sure I like all that much because there's like sometimes where like heroes will care about having like all of a certain like building type or like two and two if you have like I believe it was a Helen. Like so I don't know, like there's something about that where it was like it feels like an unnecessary restriction. Like because like usually you will be wanting to build like an extra type, but there's some edge cases where you would actually want to build one that you already have in order to like use like a hero's like sacrifice power or something, you know?
I mean,
yeah,
Hera is
that's
at a
fair, but Hera is strong.
I was gonna say
Yeah.
Hera is at a sufficient level of power. We don't need to.
No.
That is not a
But
house
that's
rule that
fair
needs to
though. Of like
happen.
it could be fun to be able to have some more options there, where maybe you build towards one of your heroes. Speaking of the next way you might build one of these monuments is with the hero abilities. Some of them can be sacrificed to get a one-time effect that's going to move you around on the board or create more monuments or switch itself out with something or what have you. A lot of them sacrifice themselves once you've met a certain condition in order to build a monument. Simple as that. Usually they're relatively hard conditions to meet. Some of them are much easier than others, let's say, but
Definitely.
usually relatively hard. And then, of course, you can also build a monument by sacrificing four philosophers, which you get from which god tile again?
Athena.
From
I
Athena,
prefer to
yes.
think of it as not them being sacrificed. They just all collectively thought hard enough to become architects. And,
Ah,
you
to
know,
become
Mhm.
architecture even, right?
yeah,
Because they do literally transform into a building.
yes, just like real architects.
Right. But yeah, those are kind of the three main ways. There might be a few edge cases I'm not thinking about with like monsters or something, but I don't believe so. I think it really is just those.
Yeah, it is just those. The monsters can affect buildings sometimes, like a couple of them can like blow up a building or change a building, but I think once the Metropolis is on the board, it's just there, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. So, you know, that's not too many ways to get victory points, but you're constantly doing those things. And every single turn, unless you're getting Apollo, which I guess someone will get Apollo every turn, who is in terms of the structure of the game, there's a number of unique gods available equal to the number of players that there are, but one of them is always Apollo, right? So you have kind of number of players minus one gods sort of rotating in and out. And sometimes they're available, sometimes they're not. And they all do very different things. And so often you find yourself in this game not being able to do what you want because Ares is just went out of rotation and you didn't get to win the bid on Ares. You weren't aggressive enough on it or you didn't have the money at the time. So then you get to go Apollo and kind of just build up your income and hope that, it'll be impactful later. But it isn't always impactful.
Yeah, especially not in the later game when like $4 doesn't matter as much and you're not going to get like the income from those spaces that you've improved like
Yeah,
going
Yeah.
forward.
you can't
You're
take advantage of compounding interest.
Yeah.
Yes. You're really relying on the bids for the other gods being like so high that instead of getting kind of a net $4, you're getting like, $4 plus not having to spend 15 or 20 on one of these other gods. And also simultaneously hoping that the things that other people are doing with those gods are expensive enough that is going to hurt their economy. They might be
Yeah.
able to spend 20 and still be gaining money during their turn and not even really care, and they're going to outbid you next turn anyways. That
Yeah.
certainly can happen.
In this game, money is king. I mean, that is like the entire like engine of how the game works is you need money to do literally everything. And I don't know if we've mentioned like you're bidding on the gods and you're trying to outbid other people. And I think most of the thinking of the game comes from just like figuring out how much you can actually afford to like go for a god and still have money left over to like do stuff with it. I
Right.
think that's like most of it is like, what do I actually need this god for, and how much money do I need? There's a lot of times in this game where I'm behind my screen looking at the money I have and portioning it out and going, this is how much I can afford to bid, and like this is the money I have to be able to set aside in order to like do anything with like a god that I get. So
Yeah.
I kind of like know where I'm at like in terms of my limits.
I think if you don't have fun with that particular puzzle, you're not going to have fun with this game, I should
Yeah, I
say.
mean, and also it's worth mentioning, even if you kind of intend to go Apollo, you should always be like forcing the bids to be higher
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Because if
on
if
the
you
other
don't if you
gods.
go Apollo straight away, someone's going to get a god somewhere down the line for a cost of zero, you know?
Mhm.
Mhm. And that can be huge. I mean, there's like a big snowballing that can happen if like somebody gets ahead in income or like doesn't have to spend as much for like a god in a round, like people should be you should be getting people to spend as much as they're willing to on whatever god they're going for pretty much every round. Otherwise, it's you know, like not great if you start falling behind, especially.
S-
Absolutely.
Certainly compared to the other two of the so-called Matago trilogy, this is the most snowbally by a significant margin. I don't think Komet has a snowbally problem, and part of that is that Komet's system, it lends itself to recovering pretty well. Like when you die, you get guys back at a pretty good rate. You're able to sort of send guys back if a battle doesn't go as well as you hoped and turn them into money. There are lots of ways to sort, and even if somebody's going a powerful strategy in the tech market, that's mutually exclusive with the techs that are not taken in the market, and you can find a way to sort of carve out a niche for yourself. In this game, if you're behind, you're kind of just behind.
Yeah. Like
Yeah.
to fall behind in Komet, you would have to basically have a like way, really, really wide, gap in, the party's knowledge of the game and ability to like see what is going to be a good strategy on the tech tree. Otherwise you're going to have some play, if you're, you know, starting the game off at least, with a relatively similar level of competence. Whereas in Cyclades, it might be like, oh, and this has happened in I think, two of our games. You get outbid on Neptune early or Poseidon
Poseidon. Yep.
or
Yeah.
whatever, and someone goes and takes every single like income C slot that is possible, and then nobody else can do anything about it, because you just take Poseidon two times in a row and you win, like that can be a snowball where it's like everybody understands the game, everybody knows what's going on. They get outplayed once in a bid, and all of a sudden you're massively behind. Same thing can happen with Ares because you have these god tiles that allow you to do movement um, in ways that other god tiles just don't. And moving around gets you control of spaces that get you income that allow you to outbid people on future rounds on god tiles and continue to deny them the ability to stop you from collecting income from these tiles. So you see what I mean in terms of, you know, it really, really does snowball in that regard.
Yeah, and I think Inish, there is a kind of self-balancing nature to the draft. Like you can't have all the good cards in an Inish draft because you can only have so many cards at the end of the draft. Um, I think that this game does have this situation as Blake described, where like because you won an important bid, you now have this big advantage that if you leverage properly will lend itself to being able to win the next important bid. And then from there, you can leverage that advantage and so on and so forth. And so I think it's more important in this game than in um, even just most games that I can think of that the players have to be undermining each other pretty aggressively. This is
Right.
a
Yeah.
game where like if you don't if you're a passive board gamer, somebody's running away with this game. Like you have to just
Yes.
actively stop people. And maybe you don't even want a god, but you have to force them to pay more for it. Otherwise,
Yeah,
they'll grow out of control very quickly.
Yeah.
And
You have to go through the throat.
absolutely. And I think that there is some sense in this game of like maybe the best strategy is just to maximize good for myself and not necessarily try to beat down the leader, right? Not necessarily to balance the table, but to maximize good for oneself, a la arcs. I'm just going to go out after whoever is the weakest that's near me and not necessarily worry about who is the strongest on the total board. And I don't think it's actually the strategy here. I don't think you can actually do that and increase your win rate over, say, going for who you think is in the lead and trying to take resources from them. Um, I actually think that is a good, well balanced aspect of this game in terms of like encouraging people to go for the leader rather than, um, the easy pickings, so to say. But I'm willing to hear otherwise. I'm sure that one could have an opinion on that. That's just my feeling on it.
well,
I
sorry,
think you're
go ahead,
about
Ben.
right. Yeah, I think you're about right. Anyways, yeah.
I was gonna say this hasn't come up in our games, but the normal way for the game to end is three metropolises. But if a player is eliminated, the game will also end. And if the game end is triggered that way, the check is for who controls the most metropolises.
Mm,
So there is a situation where this game ends very quickly,
right.
maybe
And an
even with,
incentive to go for the weakest people in
and
that case,
so
maybe.
it is one of those things where if someone loses their last like land area, they can't they have no control anymore and they can't build any more guys. And so in this hypothetical snowball situation, if somebody has even just one metropolis early, they're able to stamp somebody out, which by the way is easier because of land movement being restricted only to Ares or to someone that has a hero with an army.
Right. Which
Um,
isn't the easiest to do. It sounds like, oh, you get a hero, you're going to keep it. it's not necessarily the easiest to
Yeah,
keep.
to get a hero, you have to win the hero bid, which can be tough, and then also be able to pay 4 gold on top of it to get a hero, and the hero can only be in one place. But anyway, the point is to say that it's not like unforeseeable that a circumstances arises where someone snowballing is able to build a metropolis somehow and simultaneously be in a position to crush one person and immediately ending the game in their favor. And so I do agree, besides that, though, that there isn't really an inherent benefit for the leader to be stomping on someone, unlike arcs, because I think that there's like a finite amount of I have the meeple version of the game, so it's a finite amount of meeples you have. And so if you're spending meeples in a way that isn't going to end the game by like aggressively entering someone else's territory, those are meeples that aren't defending your advantage on maybe the tiles that you need to be defending, like your metropolis or like key income tiles. And because of the limitation of pieces you have, it might be that it doesn't benefit you to be exposing yourself that way. Even if you won the Ares bid this time, maybe next time it comes around, someone else will get it and all of your stuff is almost undefended.
Right. And I think that's fair. The my line of thinking was more on, well, if I have the option to either, try to take something from the person in the lead, or I can take, a less defended or maybe a more desirable spot from someone else, I might still go for the leader. And I think that, all things being equal, I will always decide to go for the leader, right? If the spots are equally desirable and easy to
Yes.
attack, I'm always going to go for the leader. And um, that was more what I was getting at, not so much of like, well, you don't want to overexpose yourself, and there is a bit of an incentive to, you know, um, keep close to the chest, sort of. But I agree with that as well. I just think that there is a point to be made around you want to be able to beat the leader in the bid. And so taking a location from them, even if it's just one income, right? In terms of beating them in the next bid, it's kind of like a net two change. Whereas, if you take a spot from the weaker person, you're only kind of getting one closer to being able to beat the leader in a bid.
Yeah.
It's a zero sum game. And so because the bid is so important, because the money is so important, because you need to beat, specific people, I think that there is more incentive to go after the person that you find, is the biggest threat.
Yeah. Here's a little bit of a different topic, but it's something that I've been thinking about after our plays. Is there's frequently with these kind of games, I'm kind of thinking about like how do you maximize your chances of winning, and I'm kind of like thinking about that. And frequently, people will optimize the fun out of a game. But in the spirit of thinking about that, I think that if I was playing this game against somebody that I hated, or like some AIs or something, you their only piece of information that is secret is how much money people have. You could pretty competently, if you had a notepad, keep track of exactly how much money everybody has. And I think the way that you could get really good at this game is like kind of like a blackjack kind of counting cards. If you can just mentally track how much money everybody else has, that would give you a massive advantage, and like is the only piece of information that is secret.
It's
Um,
it's also the most important piece of information,
Right.
period, which is why it's been sort of the only reason for the screens in the game to exist is to deliberately make that information fuzzier and to try in sort of the Reiner tradition of like this is information that's like known if you think about it, but like
Right.
just play the game.
I and
And
I don't think you're allowed to have a notepad unless you're playing as the Atreides, right?
yeah, if you're playing, I mean, that's actually the Atreides, the name in Dune comes from the House of Atreus, which are, an ancient Greek house, of course, the House of Agamemnon.
Hmm.
hmm.
That's what the reference is to.
I
The IDES is literally the sons of, I believe.
Oh, huh. Um, I didn't know that. I'm so bad about lore in general.
Oh yeah,
But I do want to say that I think that's a good point, Ben, of like you could optimize in that direction. I think that the fuzziness that is provided by the screens is enough for most people to still have fun. because I find it fun trying to track it and failing. I find it fun like trying to have a general idea of like I think that if I put 10 gold in here on this bid, Will's not going to be able to bid 15. Or maybe it's like, oh, he really could bid 15. I don't think he could bid 20, but if I bid 15, I'm going to have to buy, one less ship and I won't be able to do quite as big of a play as what I wanted, something like that. Um, I find that space interesting. There are some people who would totally be terrible to play this with because they would have that, eidetic memory or
Be
whatever.
like,
And
excuse me, what was your income last turn? What was your income the turn before that? And how much did you spend last turn? And
right, yeah, like
Yeah.
really, really going for it. And it's like, you know, let's take the spectrum and use that as like a little sliding, slide it back a little bit. You know what I'm saying?
I will say that this is an issue that is perhaps exacerbated by a lower player count. And I
Yes.
think with a higher player count, the information becomes even fuzzier. And maybe that's good. Like
Yeah.
maybe with a, 5 or 6 player game, there's still a leader probably, but it's probably harder to keep track of like what
Yeah.
everybody has going on,
Yeah,
just
probably
naturally.
more of a gradient of how well people are doing. Because I think in our three-player games, there was a pretty distinct, like some of the games, it was like, well, Blake is skyrocketing ahead. It was
Blake
like
had like Blake had like 4 times as much money as Ben and I combined or something.
yeah,
Yeah, I was killing it.
it
And then,
was
and
like,
then you
well,
guys you
yeah.
guys stomped on me on in our last game. You knew I needed to be challenged.
Well, apparently, because you were still in the running too. Like it wasn't
Yeah,
even
I had
like
a
it
way
was.
worse start and I still was like doing pretty good and you guys were like fucking get him. And then I came back and I was doing okay. I was doing really good.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Now,
yeah.
on that note, I would like to say I like the map generation of this game. I feel like first of all, the production of the game is good, so the map tiles, despite looking really weird, are pretty cool. I like the look, but I
Yes.
think that I would say that I like that the map generation of the game will have an impact on the gameplay.
Yeah,
Like the differently generated maps will be kind of making certain gods more or less important. Some maps Poseidon is super important. On some, maybe you don't need as many boats to get around, and areas will be more, I think it's nice that you are going to be getting that variable experience from setup, which I think is good for this kind of game.
absolutely. I don't think that it is one of those variable setups though where you make the map and you go, "Oh my gosh, the game's over." Because they're pretty smart about the after the board is made, how you put troops down in the player order. There's a sort of snaking pattern.
Well, but we should talk about that because the way we accidentally played it first is, I think, more balanced than the
Yeah.
actual way.
Yeah.
We,
So
we
here's the house rule, right? You
Yeah,
go
so
ahead, Will.
our house rule is that basically the rules of the game tell you you're basically only claiming control of 3 locations. First player takes 2 places, second player takes 2 places, third player takes 2 places. Then the third player will take 1 place, the second player will take 1 place, and the first player will take 1 place. Then, but in that
And
second,
when you take your one place, yeah.
yeah, but in that second round of placements, when you're taking the 1 place, you're placing up to 3 troops down. And the really weird thing about the design of this uh, setup is that this disproportionately benefits the first player twice
Yes.
because the first player gets to take the 2 best spots on the map right off the bat, claim them, nobody else can have them. And then they get to wait to see until everybody else has finished placing their troops to place their troops, which is crazy.
Yes.
Like I don't know how that
And
made it
and that can
past.
that can matter quite a bit, right? Because
Yeah,
you might have certain locations that at the end of the day are pretty much uncontested by your enemies. And so you go, oh, I'll just maintain control there, or maybe I'll put one guy down so he can go and storm through and get a bunch of control, but I'll put 2 guys down over here where I really need to defend myself. Whatever it might be, you have so much more info compared to
yeah,
player who went last who has the worst choices and the least information.
it seems very strange that made it past play testing because there are smart things in the setup, like the burial mat setup is good, and that the idea of this draft is okay. But and also I like that you can't place control on the same island more than once, so no one person can just uncontested control one of
Right.
these bigger islands. But the draft as is written in the rules is fundamentally flawed in an extremely obvious way for anybody who plays the game. It should be very clear to you that it is fundamentally bad, and it should be you might as well just house rule it the first time. And the way that we house ruled it is that you have to place a troop with each placement.
Yeah, you
And
get
so
one on each, you
you
know?
just get one on each location, and in that way, you're not giving I still think that the third player is at a disadvantage, but it is not nearly as bad as in
It's
the
not nearly as
initial.
bad because they get that third placement first,
They
right?
get the
So
advantage at
there's something there.
least of getting that third placement, so they get their third place before anybody else does, which sometimes that's important and it is
Yeah.
something.
I,
But
I think
the
you
other
could
way.
even go as far as doing a total snake of like, okay, first, second, third, third, second, first, second,
Oh, you
third.
mean on each placement?
Yeah, on
Yeah,
each placement instead of
it's
doing two at once, two at
yeah. I
once,
think that
two at
might be
once.
even better. But either way, I think that that's it's yeah. We have to bring that up. I mean, I think that the fundamental like the way that is written in the rule book is just terrible. And like again, I don't know how that got past playtesting because it seems
You
abundantly
you could even
obvious.
you could even do it as okay, you do the whole thing, but then the first player has to put their three guys down first, and then the second player, and then the third player. Even that would make more
Yeah,
sense because
it's
the
yeah.
third player's already at a disadvantage of having less info. So why not let them, have some info of where to put their troops, you know?
That's why it's weird to me is it feels like we just came up with like three, maybe four ways of making it more balanced. And like, I don't know why that didn't happen. Maybe they didn't
Yeah.
think it was important. Maybe we're hypersensitive to setup because of Forbidden Stars. And so we're thinking about this stuff more than the average
Well,
board gamer.
maybe, but shouldn't you be? I mean,
Yeah,
you don't want your game to start
yeah,
off on so uneven a foot, you
no,
know?
I agree. I'm just joking, but I do think
Yeah.
it's important to get that part of the game right.
Yeah.
Um, I want to at some point here talk about the monsters that I
I was
believe
about to
are not
say, I
good
was
for the
about to
game.
say.
Yeah, yeah.
There's a good handful of monsters in this that I think are either anti-fun, too powerful, um, you know, too limiting for the game design, uh, all sorts of stuff. So I've got a little list here, or rather a picture that I took because we kind of went through after our last play, and I pulled a bunch out and we talked about it. So just stop me, guys, if there's any of these that you want to talk about. If you remember, or if you don't remember what it does, I can read you what it
I know
does.
one I want to talk about. Yeah.
So my list is the Kraken, the Griffin, the
Griffin.
Giant, the Manicore. So Ben's going to talk about the Griffin. So Kraken, Griffin, Giant, Manicore. Cerberus and Nereid, I think it's pronounced. Um,
Nereid, I believe.
Nereid. I might need help with this one too. The Gray A, the repeat your
Uh,
income
The
phase one.
witches. Yeah.
Yeah,
which one is this?
The gray.
that repeats your income phase.
The gray, yeah.
The Gray A. Polyphemus, Caledonian Boar, and Medusa. And then we threw in one more that stopped certain areas from being targeted by monsters because once you remove these ones that I've mentioned, it kind of doesn't matter as much because a lot of these are targeting spaces. But
We didn't actually play a game having removed all
yeah,
these.
we
This is
haven't
just
removed these. This is
we're
theoretical.
just talking about ones that seem like they're not positively contributing to the game experience, I guess. Because I think we also we talked about snowballing militarily and financially in the game, but another thing that I think you have to talk about with monsters is that the person who's snowballing is the person who's going to be able to be in a position to take the top god on the track, which means they get first pick on the monsters. The market does not refill until the end of everything in a round, basically. And so if you buy a monster, it's not like the market refills. Those are all the monsters that will be available to the players for that round, except for Zeus getting a peek off the top, technically. But in most cases, that's it. And so if there is something important there, the person in the lead ironically will be the person who is the best position to contest and probably win the chance to buy that monster and snowball further.
Right.
Um,
And I think a great example of that is the Griffin, you know?
yes, Griffin.
The Griffin. I was the one who played the Griffin, and it felt bad. It felt like it was not something that I like wanted to do. It was like I had to do it. You take half the income of another player,
Well,
and
not half
so
the income, half
Ha
of the money that they
half of the
yeah,
have.
money that
half the
they
money.
have. Yeah.
Yes.
And keep in mind, one person always ends up paying zero and going Apollo. right?
Yep.
You don't want to be the guy going Apollo on the Griffin round because that means you held back all of your funds. You're not, out there, and everybody else, of course, on the round that the Griffin came out is like bidding, 20 gold or whatever they can afford to be the first person in line so that they can Griffin
Yep.
because you're going
I
to
was
get
a I
most of that
was
refunded. It's
I was Apollo that round. Yeah.
Yeah.
no,
Well,
no,
and
no. I was
yeah.
Apollo that
Yeah,
round,
he
Oh,
was.
were
but
you?
we
Oh yeah.
yes, but we both got Griffined because there was another card that takes a
Oh
guy
yeah.
out of the
Yeah,
graveyard.
that was what happened. You're right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sheesh. Yeah, I was the double griffin.
Yeah, the double griffin and a manticore as well. Um, like the manticore I pulled off with like a different card, like off the top three, and then killed like one of Blake's income creating creatures. He he was going for a combo.
Mhm.
Yeah, I had not the well, anyways, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Yes, but I think we won't have time to talk about each and every one of these creatures and why I think they don't work. I think the one that I would like to talk about other than Griffin is Manticore because that might seem like a weird one to people. Manticore says destroy a creature or hero. I can't stand by something that destroys a hero in this game because so much of the planning that you do is around the ability to move with your hero. And there's only, really one way that I know of to get a hero, and it's winning Hera and then buying the hero. And that opportunity goes away when these gods cycle. And so being able to have your hero killed is so detrimental. It could completely stop you from moving for, the rest of
Ever.
the game
Forever.
potentially.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
maybe you just never win Ares. Maybe you're never in a position to win Hera and buy another hero. Because if this happens in mid game, like maybe this just your game's over.
hmm And
And
even if you do get the ability to move later, or you get another hero the next round, it might be so key that you were able to move that round that having your hero Manticore is just okay. Like that might be a loss, even losing hero for one
yeah,
round.
I think the way that I think about these is like, does this card kind of break parity, right? Like, are you getting an effect that's stronger than the amount of money you're paying for it? And I think if the answer is always yes, like maybe even if you're paying five for it, like the maximum possible cost you could pay for a monster like the top of the track, then the monster is probably overpowered. You know, like there are a lot of monsters that are going to feel efficient at like two coins, especially with like a discount from a temple. But if like the monster is so good that you're willing to be bidding in the top to bidding the top god, even if you don't care about it, just to be able to pay five for it, then maybe it's a little bit too powerful. I can see so the counter argument to this is the idea that this is something that's changing the auction and making it interesting by introducing an element that isn't
Yeah.
just like what
Oh,
the
I want
gods
to win
are.
the first god because then I can buy monsters first.
But I think it's just but I understand that argument and I don't hate that argument, but the context of this game with the snowballing that we talked about before and the fact that this is kind of playing into the snowballing problem that already exists in this game makes me not like that argument as much. I don't think it's as
Yeah.
convincing because when you have these monsters that break parity, sometimes by a significant amount, or like Griffin, which is just going to refund you for like everything you've already done anyway and set somebody back a lot. And because you went first, like you're taking all the gold away that they'd be able to normally spend on their turn. And it's very difficult for me to say that this is like good for the health of the game.
So on that note, I do have to just disagree very slightly with the idea that all of those monsters are, and I don't, but you had said that they're always worth more than even if you had to pay five for them or, whatever it might be. There's some of those on there that I think are very rarely good, like the Cyclops that steals mercenaries. There's going to be a lot of board states that just doesn't matter, right? But the key being there are some of those monsters in there that are like anti-fun. It's kind of bull crap that you can build all these mercenaries and then oh well the Cyclops randomly came out and so now they're worthless, or less than worthless. They're just bad, because someone's going to take them and now they have them, right? That sort of thing.
The giant, but
Um,
yeah.
the giant, right? Um,
Yeah, we
so
chill with the
there's some stuff like
Cyclops.
that.
Yeah, the
Cyclops is a good dude.
Yeah,
Cyclops is cool. He wouldn't do that.
I didn't mean to lump him in like that. I'm sorry, Cyclops. Um,
Uh,
or like, there are times when, is the Kraken going to be worth it if it just kills one ship that's out in the middle of the ocean? I don't know, maybe not, right? But there are situations where all those monsters that I listed, I feel like they just are not healthy for the game, even if there are other situations where they're okay. Now, Griffin and Gray A, they're probably always going to be a bit bullcrap. I think the argument that the Gray A pushes you towards trying to be, bidding for the god in the top slot is a strong one. I don't know if it works with every monster, but I think it works all right with that one. I don't know.
what?
Ultimately, I don't like those monsters. I think the game would be better without them.
Well, I think that the gray goes back to the idea that these are monsters that will benefit the person and lead more.
Yes.
If you have more income, which you have because you have more area control, which you have because you're winning, then the gray A is better
Right.
because your income is bigger. Like
Yeah.
it's just
Which is why it's like the argument of like, oh, well, it'll shift the relative priority that you have for which, of the gods that are out. It's like, I don't want to do that. I want to be able to make a plan and try to follow through with it and have to sort of course correct as it collides with my opponent's plans over the next few turns, rather than make a plan and then Gray A comes out or Griffin comes out and I go, oh gosh, now arbitrarily it's no longer good for me to do Hades, even though I've been, waiting for him for 3 rounds or whatever it might be. And I've been, taking Apollo to build up money to be able to pay for him. Now all of a sudden, it's better to just go economy again because Griffin came out and, if I'm not the first one, then I'm gonna get stolen from because I've built up my money or what have you. But a small point, really, I think the spirit of the argument I 100% agree with in that these monsters are going to disproportionately benefit the people that are in the lead and creates a worse snowball effect.
yeah, I think in general, the monsters, especially the ones that we've discussed or Blake has brought up from his list, contribute to the game feeling looser, not tighter. And I think tighter is better for an area control game. And in the sense that you want it to feel like there's not a whole lot of random bullshit happening. And
Yeah,
there's always, it's fine for there to be a certain amount of that to spice things up, like via an event deck or action cards or
yeah. And in
something.
fact, it can even be quite fun,
It
It can
can be,
even
absolutely. No,
be kind of relieving, It can be a reminder that we're just here trying to have a good time and
yeah,
playing a
it's
game.
not, yeah, like it's not, even Forbidden Stars has its own event decks and everything. But anyway, but I guess what I'm driving at is like I don't think that some of these monsters are pulling the game into a situation that's too loose, where it kind of almost makes it feel like a beer and pretzels, like Dice Trucker. If you're really like adding some of these monsters that kind of invalidate all this previous strategic planning, and
Yeah.
like it's
They would
fine for
fit right in Camel Up, for
yeah,
example.
the camel.
The Griffin,
The Griffin flying into yeah, the Griffin flies in to just pick up your camel and just carry it to the finish line. Oh, I win.
Yeah, exactly.
But
I bid on the right camel.
yeah.
People have banned Greyhound racing in 49 of the 50 states, but they haven't banned Camel Up in a single one. I mean, what is this world coming to? I just don't understand it. But
That is true. There is
yeah,
something I would like to bring up, speaking of sort of the tightness or the looseness of the design, which is that I think that with the other two Matago games, they have this sort of sense of like other games in that niche being compared to them. If you are playing a drafting plus area control game, your mind goes straight to Inish, right? Like Inish is the golden standard. And if you're playing that kind of like midweight to slightly heavier area control game with like tech trees, your mind goes to Komet. What is this game doing different than Komet? Is this a game as refined as a Komet? Is it doing something deliberately different? Is the tech tree better realized? Is it worse realized, etc.? Like, it's not that you have to always compare a game one to one to another game. Like you can just enjoy a game on its own merits. But I think with those games are so well designed that almost inevitably you arrive at this question in your head of like, okay, what is this game bringing to the table versus the goats? And this game is not that way for auction and area control. And there's a very important reason for that. And that's because the game that is the game that I would compare any game that can be that uh, combines auctions with area control is of course El Grande, and you
Mm.
compare this to El Grande, and El Grande is like the definition of a design that has the exact right amount of spice, right? You have the Castillo, you have the variable market, you have the auction at the beginning, but the one of the big differences in the design is that even if you a lot of the time if you lose the auction, it's because you like wanted to lose the auction. Or maybe you realize I want to be in the middle in this auction, or like I need to get more guys on the board, and that's rather than like monsters
Yeah,
influencing an auction, you have the other sort of extra element of the auction
right.
that can influence things is to the amount of guys you want to have in your pool to be able to place on the board. But then
Or maybe
also,
even want to save your higher number card or your lower number card
yeah,
for a
and
later
like,
point,
yeah, exactly. I think the system of having this deck of cards is more interesting than it just being all money because it's like if you do your super high bid, your 13, your 12 or whatever, um, that's gone. There is a way to get it. I think one of the cards does get it back, but like that's a one-time thing and you'd have to commit to that specific auction choice in order to do so. And but I think the most important thing is that there's not an Apollo equivalent in El Grande. Like, there's not an action in the market in El Grande that you're going to feel like, oh God, I'm just passing the turn. Because even if you did that, you're still getting guys on the board. You're still doing a thing. Maybe it is not the best thing, the thing that you definitely would have preferred to do. And I think combined with that, there's the always present, like the ability to place the king, and that's always very impactful. There are going to be some auctions in Cyclades where I'm like, man, I don't really like care about any of this, you know?
Yeah, it
Like
definitely does happen.
like there are good there are situations where it's almost a race to Apollo because like maybe nothing really is progressing your board state in a meaningful fashion. Like maybe Ares and Poseidon are not there and you don't have the money to contest Hera. And so the other two auctions are maybe Athena and Zeus. And Athena can get you a Metropolis, but maybe it's better for you to just go economy. And you're like basically going to say, hey, I mean, maybe it's just better for me to just pass the turn. And the thing about that is that when you go Apollo, you might as well just leave the room. Like, like,
Yeah.
like you're not doing anything, really. Like, you're not moving troops or really contributing at all. And like, you might as well get your two coins and your two coin, uh, prosperity tokens queued up and just sort of leave because like you can no longer influence the game until the next round. And my guess, the point I'm making is that that's not the case when you lose the auction in All Grande. And I think that's important because it's like, as we mentioned it earlier in this podcast, l getting Apollo late game does feel like passing your turn, kind of
Right.
non-consensually. And even though it is a good and early game to be building your economy, and so that doesn't feel good, like to have to fight just to be able to play the game.
Yeah.
Like it's not like fighting to do something you want to do. It's like fighting be able to play the game at all at a
Yeah.
certain point.
And you might end up getting Apollo more if you're in a worse position is the
Yeah,
other
that's
thing, you
it's
know?
this snowballing
Another
problem.
effect there. I
Yeah.
think we really ought to comment, and I think this is a good place to do it, because I think it's relevant to this point. This game is rated much better at 4 players than it is at three, and it's rated at better at 5 players than it is three as
Yes.
well. And we talked about this briefly after our last play of like this must be better at four because there's a real problem that comes up when at 3 players you only have two god tiles other than Apollo revealed at any given time, and they might be really key to your being able to play Hades at some point is going to be really key to your strategy. And I think you could go down the line of reasoning of, well, even if that Hades card is going to be in the slot,
By Hades, do you mean
three out of
Hera? Sorry.
um no, who am I thinking of? It's not Hades. What is the war god?
Ares?
Ares, yeah.
Ares.
Oh,
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah,
Okay, yeah.
yeah. I don't know them.
Oh, sorry. It's okay. It's okay. I just wanted to make
My bad.
sure.
No, no, no. Important.
Hades is not in this version of the game. Just yeah.
Right. My bad, everybody. But no, like, let's say it's really important to get Ares so that you can move all your troops around. Well, they're only going to be in the market for every 2 out of 5 turns instead of every 3 out of 5 turns in a 4 player game. And that's a big deal, even if you do have, more people that are trying to get that tile in a higher player count. I think that there's a real case where one person takes it twice in the lower player count, and then 2 people never get to see it until it rotates back in. And that could be really, really impactful. So there's a reason that 81.4% of people that voted on the 4 player count ratings for this game have said that it's best at 4 player, and only 14.3% of people at the 3 player count voted it as best.
I think
Um,
that makes a lot of sense. And I
yeah,
I agree that to be fair to this design, I think this is definitely a higher player count game. Maybe you
yeah.
don't want to play this at 3 realistically, and it is like a 4 to 6 game, maybe a 4 to 5 game. And although one thing that's interesting also, we don't have personal experience with this, but you can also play teams when you have like 4 or 6. You could do like 2v2, 3v3.
Mm.
And so that's another thing that's enabled by being at that 4+ player count, which could be really exciting. So
But how did
unfortunately, sorry.
yeah, you can play as like so you're both just trying to like are you both still bidding or are you
Yeah,
bidding together?
yeah, it's in there's like a whole rule set for team play,
Huh,
Mm.
okay.
Weird.
but
Games love to throw crap like that in nowadays because some asshole on Kickstarter was like, "Oh, it needs a solo mode. What if I want to do team base, so that my girlfriend will play?" Like, shut the hell up and get,
oh man.
get around the table, with your buddies and play it. Bring your girlfriend. She could play. Put a little trust in her. I mean, come on, Frank. Cecilia's not that dumb type of deal.
Yeah, sometimes you have to let the baby birds flop out of the nest and try to fly, or else
Right.
how else are they going to learn?
Yeah.
But
I
setting that aside,
the one
I
thing
don't
I want to mention here, this game is pretty snappy in the early turns, and in the later turns it does get a little bit bogged down. I think because of that this item that Ben brought up earlier of like a lot of turns you're sitting there looking behind your screen like, oh, how much money do I have? I better count it just to be sure. And okay, if I do the bid for 20 to deny Will, because he's gonna have it if I don't bid it for 20, then I'm gonna have 5 coins left. What can I do with 5 coins? And like that really does slow down the game. And that is especially brutal if you are in the situation that Will's described where you got Apollo and you want to walk out of the room because then everybody else is sitting around there like, freaking planning, conniving behind their screens while you're just like, I'm gonna do nothing for the next, and maybe it's 10 minutes, but still.
That's the thing is Apollo. Yeah, I mean Apollo in the early turn is like whatever, it's fine. Like this is going to take 5 minutes at most, but later on, you're missing out.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
Yeah.
you really are.
We
So,
also ran into a bit of a weirdness where you had no money at one point, and then you were just like forcing the bid to
oh
come out in
yeah,
the way that you wanted it to.
that is a
yeah,
funny
that
rule.
yeah.
Yeah,
There's no rule preventing you from deliberately bidding so high that you cancel that you basically reset the auction phase because when you do so, you lose half your money as the disincentive. But if you are so poor that you don't care, like maybe you have 1 coin or 0 coins, then it's probably worth it for you to deliberately screw up the bid for everyone
yeah.
in order to ensure that certain things happen or don't happen.
And I
And
and I
so
did do this, and I felt like a total ass. But it
it
was like I
is,
had I had 0 coins, I had 0 spots with income. If I didn't get Apollo, I would not only be able to be unable to do anything that current turn, but also next turn. And so I basically told the guys, I was like, I have to get Apollo, and also because I'm an ass, I would like it if Will got Poseidon.
Yeah, there's a situation where he's holding us hostage because there's no rule in the game that prevents him from being like, well, I can do this an infinite number of iterations
Right.
until we finally reach the timeline that is as I have predicted. And and
Yeah.
it's like,
I don't
okay, I mean,
recommend doing that against people that you care about.
yeah,
Which
yeah,
I
we're
do
we're
care about you guys. That's not what I'm saying, but
yeah,
Yeah.
geez, yeah, yeah.
there's
What
some
about
trust
us?
in the system, or I was
Yeah,
like,
we're
we
thick-skinned.
can
It's
all
okay.
we can all laugh about
Mm.
this.
But it is interesting that like that exists within the framework of the rules.
Yeah.
Have him lose a priestess, because he had like a couple of priestesses. They should have
Yeah,
just
I
lost
had I had
a priestess.
five of them, I believe.
Yeah.
It is interesting that like, there's no consequence to doing so because it's yeah, I mean, I don't know, man. It's weird.
Well, the bid does happen right after the income phase, so I guess they expect that you have some income. But a fellow like myself who set up on all priestess tiles in the early game and then went on to conquer two more before ever receiving income, you know.
That's fair. That's fair.
Mhm.
But yeah, anyway, is there anything else you guys would like to speak about before we move to scoring? Is there anything I'm forgetting
No.
here?
I'm just gonna quickly look at some pictures to see if anything sparks a memory here, but I don't believe so. I guess there were one or two heroes that probably could be, you know, thinned out along with Pandora was one we talked
Pandora
about.
seemed a little bit overpowered. I don't know how that one snuck
Yeah,
through.
Pandora's sacrifice ability is too good, but I think more importantly, the ability to steal more mercenaries is just kind of like a feels bad sort of mechanic,
I
you
think
know?
the important
Yeah.
thing about the Giant and about Pandora regarding mercenaries is that there are going to be games where you just don't get Ares, and but maybe you can get Hera, and so
Right.
Hera is how you're getting your movement because you got a hero via her, and it's also how you're getting mercenaries because she allows you to purchase mercenaries. So like sometimes it's not really, it's not like you made a like choice to be the guy with mercenaries.
Yeah.
And so in that sense, it feels kind of arbitrary to be like, oh, now all these cards in the
Yeah.
deck punish you for having
And
mercenaries
and that's the
because,
only difference between the mercenaries and the
yes.
regular troops, to my knowledge, is when you purchase them and that they can be stolen.
Yeah.
I think it yeah, I mean again, I think this comes back down to maybe this game is just better at a higher player count because like, Ares is there more often. Maybe he's less contested because eventually people run out of dudes to put on the board and then you can get your turn at Ares and
Yeah.
Right. I will also say that I think this game is great with the Meeple version, and that probably unnecessary to have more than that. If you
oh
do have it, then
sure,
that's great.
yeah.
You'll probably have fun. But
Meeple version of
um,
the yeah, that's another thing. We didn't really talk about it. I think I mentioned it in passing regarding the map, but the production of this game is excellent. Everything
yes,
except for the rule book is really great. I think that the Meeple version of the game looks awesome. You should definitely not feel like you have to get like the mini version. And by the way, the box for the for the like downscaled Meeple version is already a pretty big box. It's not a small box for a Meeple
right.
game. And so I haven't seen how big the box is for the minis version, but I can only imagine it's like two boxes or
Yeah, because it's
one.
not like there's a bunch of extra space in the Meeple
No,
version.
it's yeah, it's full up. So it's either two boxes or one absolutely massive
Yeah,
box that's barely going to fit into a Calyx, slot. I mean, I don't know, but anyway, point is that this is definitely a game where the focus of the game is also the auction. It's not really on like the troops, which are kind of secondary or even tertiary to what's going on in the auction and otherwise. And so I don't feel like it's that important to be, you know,
yeah,
splashing into the minis.
I would agree. But otherwise, no. I looked through. I don't have anything else on my mind on this one. I feel I've said my piece.
Yeah.
All right, sick. So Cyclades, Legendary Edition. BGG gives this new version of the game an 8.2. The old version of the game was a 7.5, with obviously more ratings since it's been around since 2009.
A
Mm.
7.5 from 2009 is kind of like an 8.5 from
I know, I mean,
2024. So really, the
2000,
old version's rated higher.
I agree, especially with more ratings. It's yeah, I mean, score inflation is real. We've talked about it a lot.
Yeah. 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 I can jump in here with a rating if you guys are ready
Yeah.
for me.
Yeah, go ahead,
Sure.
go ahead.
I suspect that my rating is going to be higher, but I'm giving this one an 8. And you know, we've dug in a little bit on this one for some of the things we don't like. I think I need to reiterate here. I'm giving it an 8 because genuinely I think this is a really fun and exciting game to play. And those are two different things, you know. Like I think that you're going to have fun, and I think there are also going to be like big, epic, exciting moments where you're around the table and you're going, "Oh my gosh, wow, like, I can't believe that happened." And that's what I want from a game like this, that does this sort of theme. That's what I want from a game that is in that area controlled genre. I want a lot of player interaction, and I think that you get this in Cyclades. It really encourages you to be having some interesting table talk and talking about, who's in the lead, what can we do about it, and what should we do with this auction? How are we going to help each other here? Um, I think all of that in this game is solid. Now, is it rough around the edges? Absolutely. I don't think that it's so bad a system that you can't do some things to help it out, such as what we talked about with the monsters, such as what we talked about with um, the starting location draft and kind of eliminating the funkiness that further hurts the third person. Um, like thinning out the heroes, at least with Pandora and maybe looking at a few others. I think there are things you can do that basically acknowledge that this is a workable system that is a little bit rough around the edges, which is why I feel comfortable giving it an 8.
Yeah. I think I'll hop in here.
Sure.
I think it's a 7 from me. That's what I had locked in. Um, I think in general, as I was playing this game, it went pretty quick. Last time we played twice in a row. Um, and it was like it was like 2 hours for each game. Um, but I feel like I kind of felt it. Like I felt the 2 hours pass more than I do with some other games that are about that long. Um, I don't know how to explain it other than that. It's mostly just like a feeling that I got where it was kind of um, like I didn't dislike it, but it like, I don't know, I didn't feel it. It doesn't feel like it's exactly my cup of tea. Um, I guess maybe the problems that are presented to me in this game I'm not as interested in solving as some of the other games that we've played. Um, I don't know. There's something about it that is like I don't have as much fun with as with some of the other games. Um, yeah, I don't know. It kind of like it was a little bit weird. There's like something there, but I think it's mostly good. I think it just has some parts that don't feel amazing, you know?
Sure. That's very reasonable.
Yeah.
Maybe there is a version of the game where you take a lot of those parts out, like we were talking about with some of the weirder monsters and maybe one or two of the heroes, and the game starts to feel a little bit less wild. Um, but maybe some people want that wildness. Anyway, I'm jumping in here after I had to go back and look at this beautiful spreadsheet that Blake made for us way back and think about like when's the last time I gave an 8? When's the last time I gave a 7.5? And I realized we didn't bring it up, but Fractured Sky is also auction plus area control. I
That's
think
true.
I think this is sitting with Fractured Sky for me, with with of course the house rule in Fractured Sky, which is a 7.5. I don't think it gets to an 8 for me. I realize I gave Tyrants an 8, I gave Huang an 8. I think Huang and Tyrants are both just super solid designs. And the change I wouldn't make any changes to Huang really. And Tyrants, I think the very minor house rule was just because we wanted to have the game last longer, which is never a serious complaint. But anyway, I think 7.5 is about right for me. It is rough around the edges. I like a lot of what's here. I like auction games, but Ben brought up sort of an interesting point, which is that I think the puzzle that this game's auction creates, I don't love as much as the puzzle of some other auction games. And I think that that's pretty important because like the auction is, as I said earlier, it's the most important part of the game by far. Like everything, this is the auction is the whole game. And the thing is it has some serious shoes to fill, like El Grande being the ultimate auction area control game in terms of just very clean design. And then you also have, some amazing auction games that are also going to be contending for if you're in the mood for an auction game, maybe you're not even pulling out an auction plus area control game. Maybe you're pulling out Raw, you know?
Right.
And
Yeah.
I think Fractured Sky with the house rule that's we talked about a lot in our episode is also like it feels like this, where it's a design that I think fundamentally I like, and I think that it had rough edges, and the house rule helps a lot with that. But I think even with Fractured Sky, frankly, I think that I think I like the information, um, the sort of the amount of information that you have in Fractured Sky, I think is a more interesting puzzle, and the sort of the nature of bluffing and not bluffing. And in Cyclades, there's not really a bluffing element. I mean, you can sort of be bluffing that you don't have a lot of money, I guess, but like if anybody's paying attention, they'll know you have a
Right.
certain amount above a certain amount of money. And there's not any benefit to bluffing because like if you go low on something, you'll just be knocked off it and then you'll be forced to maybe bid higher than what you'd originally wanted. So there's not a strong reason not to sort of lead with a bid that you think will be too high for other people and not
Yeah.
make an effort to bluff.
I think often that was the thing that I was calculating behind my screen was just like, okay, what is the maximum I can spend? Um, like and still be able to do my stuff. Because like mostly it was like, well, that's what I'm gonna spend if I have to. And then past that, I'm just not going to, I'm gonna have to just do something else if somebody outbids me. Like it's kind of just like, well, like if
Right.
somebody has 20, then I'm just not gonna be able to like I can't go 20 because then I just won't be able to do what I want to do. So like
Yeah.
just see if they have it, you
But
know?
then it's like, okay, well, if I don't bid 15 on this guy, maybe to get Ares, you have to spend 15, but to get Zeus, you would only have to spend 5. But Zeus might be so much worse for you than Ares that you don't even care that you're getting it for 10 cheaper. It's just like, no, I have to bid the
Yep.
maximum amount to get Ares. And I think that, again, that problem might be diminished a little bit with more, God pile options to bid on, but it's still going to be there in some way. So I think that's fair.
Yeah, and I like this game. Like I'm not a 7.5 for me is not I don't give a 7.5 to a game that I don't like. I know that in sort of the world of games journalism, a 7.5 is like giving something a 0, but we're fresh off of giving Burning Banners like fours. I think Ben, did you give it a 3?
I
I think you
might,
might
I
have
don't
given
know.
it even lower than a 3. It might have been like a 2.5 or a
What was it?
2 or something. It
Yeah,
was it
anyway.
was a pretty funny rating
So
to
you have to
me.
bear in mind that on this channel, the 7.5 is like it's still a good game. It's just the crucial thing is that it's a good game, but it's not like an all-timer amazing game. Like, Inish and Komet and of course El Grande. So
I mean, we play so many damn games. We have so many like between you two that it's like I don't know. It has to be something really special for me to like want to like play it over a lot of the stuff that we
that's the
already
thing, right?
play.
Is
You
it
know?
Well, once you're past the novelty honeymoon stage of a game, is it staying in your collection? Are you playing it over like the really amazing games that are in this exact same niche? And I'm not convinced by this one yet. That's sort of where I'm at. Is it like I love the theme, I love the look of the game, and so maybe there's like if I'm feeling like I'm in an ancient Greek mood, maybe I'm coming for this game. But otherwise, maybe I'm reaching for Raw, maybe I'm reaching for El Grande, basically
Fractured
for
Skies even. You bring up
and
Fractured Skies and I'm like, I
Fracture
want to
Sky.
play that one again.
Yeah,
Right.
You
But
know?
the exploratory phase here was, I think
it
quite a
was
good
fun.
time. And
Yeah, I
and
think so.
and and sometimes you can get to where like, oh, we haven't played that one in a while, and it was like, maybe that'd be fun to bust out again. And then you bust out again and you see some of the same issues, but you're like, it was fun to have out.
Yeah,
I
I
feel like
mean,
this game could fit that that
I think
sort of role.
I think if we have four people, I want to bust this out again and like
Yeah,
see how it feels with that sort of state of affairs and see if that really helps
right.
fix some of the issues that we have with it. And so it's possible that with four players and above, maybe it's an eight, maybe it's higher than an eight. But until then, 7.5 for me.
Yeah.
That's fair. Epic.
All right, I think that's the
That's
podcast.
that's the podcast. I don't have anything else to say except
And then
for yeah.
Ben,
Oh, go
Ben
ahead.
with our outro.
See you later, guys. Have a good one.
That wasn't the outro. Oh no.
I don't know.
Ben,
We're
you're supposed to perform your operatic outro. Didn't I tell you?
oh, really? Yeah.
I went anti-improv mode
Goodbye.
there.
Time to say goodbye.
Goodbye.
I was kidding. Anyway, see you guys in the next one.
All
See
right.
ya.